sucked into, to get drawn into, engaging, combating the world, the ideas in which we live. And I always think that the Church of Jesus Christ has been and is a place that is, we've been called out of darkness into His marvelous light. We are otherworldly, other kingdom. We are, and we have, in the gospel, in the good news, the timeless message that the world doesn't need in the last 5 years. It's always needed.
Amen.
And the author of Hebrews is writing to people who are living in very, very difficult times. If you were to go a few chapters later from here, it's what we call the Great Faith chapter, and talking about the great faith of the people in the Bible, but it doesn't stop there. It talks about the faith of those who were living during that time. So the whole context of this letter that was written to the Church of Christ was a world that was broken, a world that was difficult, a world where, even what was going on then would surprise us even today as far as how barbaric it was. So as we read, should remember that there's nothing new under the sun, that what was timeless for people living in very difficult times is true for us. And I'm going to read Hebrews 6:13 through 20. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater to swear by, he swore by himself. So back then, if you wanted to keep an oath, you'd always find something to greater swear by. Well, God doesn't have anything greater to swear by. So he swears by himself, saying, surely I will bless you and multiply you. And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes, an oath is kind of a final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of His purpose, He guaranteed it with an oath. That's kind of wordy, but we're going to talk about that. So that by two things that never change, in which it's impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might find strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope that is set before us. We have this sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the holiest of holies, that inner place in the sanctuary behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone before us on our behalf, having become a high priest forever. Hope. I think, culturally we define the hope in a way that really isn't a biblical way to define hope. When we say we hope for something, it usually just means wishful thinking. Like, I hope the Bengals win today. That's pretty wishful thinking this year. We do that on far more serious matters. Well, I went for a job interview and I hope I get that job. I hope when I go to the doctor's office this week that when I get that scan done, I hope it doesn't reveal anything I don't want it to reveal. Hope is culturally this place of wishful thinking. With biblical hope, with Bible hope, it's almost the exact opposite. Hope is actually a certainty. There's a certainty attached to it. It's a true hope, a hope that is actually real, that will be realized. And we live in the culture, we live in the day of that wishful thinking hope. And so guess what happens? Our hope meter, where is your hope meter this morning? It depends. Our hope meter is so much determined on our circumstances, right? Yes, often it is. Things are going well, we feel pretty hopeful. When things aren't going pretty well, they don't feel pretty hopeful. And so, I mean, our hope meter sometimes is really, really giddy. I always, it's getting to be Christmas time, and one of my favorite little Christmas shows that I used to watch was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and Rudolph, he's so funny, and he's so cute in the thing, and he's there, he's growing up as a little boy, and this is kind of the hope meter, it's kind of what I thought of how giddy we get sometimes, but he's playing reindeer games before his nose goes off, and then he's sent by all his friends, but he's playing reindeer games, and there's another cute little deer that likes him. And she kind of communicates that to Rudolph. And Rudolph's hope meter goes crazy. So one of the cutest parts of the thing, he starts jumping up and down. I'm cute! I'm cute! She thinks I'm cute! I think that's where our hope meter is sometimes. Excited because our circumstances, because the lines are falling in the very pleasant places for us, and things are working out. And then it could be within the same week that hope meter takes a crash, because we actually realize that something else isn't turning out. And you know what the struggle is we begin to realize that we actually don't have the means by which we can control the fact that it actually will turn out. Where is hope? Where's God in the midst of our struggles? Where is God when houses of worship become crime scenes? You know, we so communicate that view of hope that even as I was reading stuff this week, I mean, part of the mockery of a watching world of what happened last week, I actually was reading, was, what did the house of prayer do for them? We need to pray for the people of Texas. Well, why do we need to pray for them? They were in a house of prayer, and it didn't stop them from happening. You see how we have this skewed view that, yes, the world embraces, but sometimes I think the world embraces that because it's actually what the church communicates. And things, our hope meter is here, God is at work. When the hope meter is empty, God is gone. He's absent. But we all ask the question, how can I be certain that God's going to do exactly what He says He's going to do? How can I be certain that everything is going to be okay? And do you know what I found this week, even as I was thinking through this and thinking through just even what happened last week and thinking through that, you know, when it comes to something, you know, and I'm a pastor, so I'm theological, and I'm all, you know, here's what's true of me. I can actually take an event like last week that happened in Texas, these major events, you know, and it doesn't have to be church, it could be a movie theater, it could be a country music concert in Las Vegas, and you know what I find my heart doing is I actually can find my heart at rest, that evil is so evil and it's so unexplainable that for me, my heart immediately actually can go to this passage that, you know, we do have an anchor and we have something in the midst of these times. And by the way, this is all true. But my heart immediately goes there that this is, man, there is good news. And my good news is I have this place to rest. And I don't understand Sutherland, Texas. I don't understand Las Vegas. And I don't understand what God is doing. But I'm going to trust that He knows what He's doing. And He has really got this in ways that I don't understand. I can do that this week when it comes to Texas and when it comes to Las Vegas and when it comes to Colorado. But you know, when it comes to my story and my family and my marriage and my children, I get anxious. I get controlling. And somehow, I can leave this world and what is going on to it up to a faithful trust in God. But I leave my own career, my own calling, and my own family somehow becomes all about me. And I fret, and I cringe, and I read, and I demand. Because in the end, my anchor rests in here and not up there. I want to challenge us, is everything going to be okay with you this week? Is everything going to be okay? I mean, these are the questions. I mean, Paul is writing this. How can we be certain that God is going to actually do what he promised he would do? Because you know what? When I look around, it just doesn't seem like he's doing. And we read, we can go back to the first verse. You know, one thing Scripture does, one of the beautiful things of Scripture is he gave us stories. And what happens is we flatten the stories of the Old Testament and we make them all about us, or we turn them into Aesop fables and they produce a moral truth. The writer of Hebrews doesn't do this because he actually says, all right, I know people, Church of Christ, to whom I'm writing, you're wondering if everything is going to be okay. You are wondering if God is really going to keep his promises. I'm going to tell you a story. And the story is a story that if you were of the Jewish tradition, you would know, and even by that time, this is a later epistle, you would have known the story of Abraham. But in case you don't know the story of Abraham, let me tell you the story of Abraham. And I'm actually going to do that really briefly here. It's a long story, but I'm going to really shortcut it here. But Abraham, he was a guy who actually lived in the most idol-infested place in the world. Actually, if you actually were reading the book of Genesis, location-wise, and I think it's meant to be this week, when God finds Abraham, he finds him geographically in the place that is the farthest that could ever be from the Garden of Eden, where man fell. And Abraham isn't living for God. His family's not living for God. But God goes and finds him and says, Abraham, I want you to get up and leave your family, and I want you to go to a land I'm going to give you, and I'm going to make you a great nation. And to Abraham, that took faith because he got up and went. He didn't know where he was going. He was young and he was energetic, and so he's excited. God's going to make him into a great nation, and God says, I'm going to multiply you and do that. But then there becomes a problem because Abraham, he continues to get older, and there's no kids. And then he really gets old. And there's no kids. Is everything that God said that was going to happen really going to happen? Is God really going to do what he said he's going to do? Because what I see, and what actually science actually might tell me, what experience has told me, is God is not going, he's not following through. And so, you know what? Abraham's just like us. He says, well, okay, maybe I'm missing something here. maybe I was supposed to do something. Maybe God messed up. And so, you know what? I'm going to take matters into my own hand. And I'm going to actually find a younger woman. And I'm going to have a baby by her. Or I'm about to die because this king I'm going to, as God's calling me, doesn't like me, so I'm actually going to just give my wife up to him. And I mean, Abraham did some really dastardly things because he wanted to believe and make the promise of God happen. Listen, when Abraham was doing those things, he was wanting to make the promises of God happen. And God said, no, that's not how it's going to happen. So then, miracles, they're 90 and 100 years old, and miracles, they have a baby and a womb that's been dead. Abraham's feeling pretty good about that. He says, okay, I've got the promise now. I've got my boy. I've got my boy Isaac. Things are good to go, and I'm raising Isaac, and I'm doing Isaac, and we're going to do it. Isaac's the man. Isaac's the man. And then what does God ask him to do as Isaac grows into a young man? He says, by the way, Abraham, I want you to take the boy that you had as a miracle when you were 190 years old, and I want you to take him, and I want you to take him up on a mountain, and I want you to kill him. I want you to sacrifice him. Lord, you said I was going to have a great many people, and I was going to be a great nation. Abraham's faith has grown, and Abraham actually takes his son up to a mountain. He raises a knife to kill his own son, just as God asked him to do. God stays his hand. God made a promise to Abraham. The writer is referring that to you, to us and to them. And you know what? That oath, and so, Abraham was, they had circumcision in the Old Testament that was going to mark Abraham's offspring. There was another oath God made with Abraham, and I'm going to end the Abraham story with this, and then we're going to move quickly through the rest of this. But in Genesis chapter 12, so back in that day, if you had someone greater over you, like a king, and you were the servant of the king, back in that day, what you would do is you would bring some animals, and everything was kind of animal sacrifice back then, and you would sacrifice the animals. You would kill the animals, and what you would do is you would take, this is in Genesis 12, you would take the animals and you would split them in half. And you would put one half the animal here and one half the animal here, and you would do that, and you would create kind of this pathway through the animals. Now, if I were serving a king, I would enter into an agreement with that king, and then I would walk through the end. This is the way you would keep an oath. You would walk through those split animals, and basically you would be saying to the king, King, if I disobey you and I don't keep my end of the bargain, then the same thing that's been done to these animals can be done to me. It's pretty gruesome. Well, in Genesis 12, God tells Abraham, go find a heifer. And I want you to cut them in half, and I want you to lay inside. Abraham knows what's going on. Abraham knows what's going on, and Genesis 12 says that Abraham is terrified. Abraham's going to enter an agreement with God. And he knows what that agreement says, that if what I'm saying is, if Abraham's saying to God, God, if I don't keep my end of the bargain, may what happened to these animals happen to me. Abraham goes to sleep terrified. Why? Because he doesn't stand a chance. Genesis 12 tells us that in that night, God came to him in a vision with those split animals. And the pillar of fire as a torch, which is a symbol of the presence of God, came through and cut right through those torn pieces. God was saying to Abraham, may what happened to these animals happen to me if you don't keep your end of the bargain. That he swore by an oath. That if the man and woman he created could not keep their end of the bargain, that he would die. I swear by it, he says in the Old Testament. I swear by this oath that if you and me and Abraham and his offspring cannot keep our end of the bargain, that he will be cut in half. He will pay the penalty for the break in the agreement. That's what the writer of Hebrews is appealing to. They're wondering if God's going to keep his end of the bargain. They're wondering if everything is going to be okay. Is God really going to do what he's going to say he's going to do? And the writer of Hebrews is saying, yes, he was faithful to Abraham, and Abraham had to wait patiently, but when he had waited patiently, everything that God promised in his word came true. He's saying that to the writer of Hebrews, and he might have been actually writing to people who were actually physical descendants of Abraham. You can go to the next slide. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath. The writer of Hebrews is saying, you and I are the heirs of that same oath. We're the heirs of that promise. That promise that was given to Abraham was given to you and to me. The promise that God is going to be faithful. The promise that God is going to be the one who walks with us. The promise that God is going to keep his end of the bargain. What the writer of Hebrews is saying, God is so serious about his word. God is so serious about the promises that he makes that he actually sealed them with an oath, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But here's the oath. Again, you go to the next slide. So that these two things that are guaranteed, that God does not lie. And if God does not lie, his promises are unbreakable. And then he goes in to the writer of Hebrews goes in and he says, God kept the bargain. Was Abraham obedient? Did he keep his end of the bargain with God? No, he didn't. No, the answer to that is no. No. Did every son of Abraham that is given, and again we're getting close to the Christmas season where we read the gospel accounts of the birth of Christ, and we read those long genealogies that are so boring. So-and-so begat so-and-so, and so-and-so begat so-and-so, and so-and-so begat so-and-so. We can't even pronounce their names. You know what the genealogies are telling us? Abraham had a son, and he begat so-and-so, and that so-and-so failed to keep the end of the bargain. And that so-and-so failed to begat a son, and he could keep the end of the bargain. The genealogies are there to remind us that they failed, and 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 we're getting tired of reading them, but we're still reading them, and they failed, 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 and then Jesus came. Do you see any genealogies in the Bible after Jesus? No. You don't. Because God made a promise to Abraham. Failure upon failure upon failure was met in the end with Jesus, who then came. He lived. And he died. And he was cut in half on a cross. He was killed. Confirming forever that his promise is true. And because of that, I'm going to close with 19 and 20. It's the next slide. Because of Jesus, we have this sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. A hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain. We flee and we run to our refuge. I love the language there. We have this sure and steadfast anchor of our souls, of the very part of us that is the eternal reality, the very part of us where we feel and think, the very part of us that aches, the very part of us that the psalmist says, my soul is the place that cries out. It's the place that cries out. How long? It's the place that cries out, God, are you going to keep your end of the bargain? God, are you really there? It's that place. It's that place of the soul. That there is a surety and a certainty that comes for our soul. We're running and we're fleeing from our heartache. We're running and fleeing from our despair. You go back a couple of slides now. I don't know which slide it's going to be. Go back one more. I'm missing it right now, but maybe it was a different version I was reading. But we have, actually, it's the last slide. We have this sure and steadfast anchor of the soul. We have this thing that we hold on to literally with both hands. And we don't let go. We reach out past what we see. We reach out past what all of the appearances tell us. It's what Abraham was called to do, to reach out past what you see, to reach out past what your circumstances may be telling you. And you reach out, and we have this sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place, which is the temple, that inner place behind the curtain. Remember, there was a curtain that was torn in two when Jesus died on the cross. Going behind that curtain where Jesus is gone, that one holds on to. It's an unbreakable lifeline. And we have the confidence. Why? Not because we hold on very well, but because Jesus already ran. He's a forerunner on our behalf. And he's a high priest now forever. You know, when events happen, it's interesting to watch how we react to them. And this is the danger, and this is where our anxiousness comes in. You know, when something like last Sunday happens, or something in Las Vegas happens, what's one of the first things we want to know? It's one of the first things that investigators end up doing. I mean, we ask the question, why? But here's the route we want to go because we're uneasy. I mean, all of a sudden, it's a small Baptist church in a little town in Texas. It's not New York City. It's not Las Vegas. We want to know what happened because we want to be safe. We want to be sure. We want to be steadfast. We want to be safe. And so what we begin to do, the first thing we want to know is, what was his or her motive? You know why we want to know the motive? Because if we know the motive, if we know why it happened, we can start to make sense. We can finally have some confidence and surety. Well, if we know the motive, we will be safer the next time. And I am not against, by the way, trying to figure out motives, and I'm not against safety, and I'm not against all of those things. But what happens is that for the Church of Christ and for our culture is we begin to have anxiety, and we come to rest, and, well, if we know the motive, if we know what would happen, if we just knew the motive, we would be safer. Till the next one happens. And there's a different motive. And there's a different reason. We want to know the motive because we want to dodge the situation from happening again. And we begin subtly to place our confidence in our motive and finding out the motive. I'll be safer. Things will be okay. We do that in our own lives too. You know, we want God to show up. We want God to be okay. We want to know if we're okay. We want to know if we're spiritually okay. And so what so subtly happens is we come alongside and our confidence begins to build in the wrong things. We become confident if our life is going okay. Our external circumstances are okay. And the other subtle thing of the enemy, and even if they're not okay, we think, am I okay? Even if the circumstances are there. And we begin to have faith, but then we begin to have faith in the wrong things. How am I before God? Am I okay with God? Is God okay with me? How do I know if I'm okay? Well, then we turn to behaviors. And all of a sudden, we start putting confidence. Somehow the whole enterprise of the church is actually become an enterprise of how we can have confidence, peace, and rest based upon our behavior, based upon our obedience. I know I'm okay with God because I obey more than you. I know I'm okay with God, and our faith becomes in our obedience. Scripture never called us to have faith in our obedience. And if we're really, really being honest, if your faith is in your obedience, you're toast. Amen. That's what we do. We feel confident. And you know what? We do it with other people. I have confidence. I have confidence in that person. They are going to make it to heaven. Because they look good and they do good things, and we just do it. The whole enterprise of the church is based upon that. Actually, the very enterprise of what I do, my calling. Listen. The only sure hope that I have for you and that I have for myself, that God is okay with us, is the shed blood of Jesus Christ, period. Amen. It's the only confidence. That Jesus plus nothing is everything. I mentioned in my Reformation Day sermon when I spoke on that topic, you could throw all kinds of Bible verses at me. I may engage them. I may not as I get older. One thing I do know, and I said it that Sunday, and I will say it again, if that is not true, this I know for sure, no matter how many scriptures you throw at me, no matter how much you scream at me, if this is not true, I'm hell-bound. If Jesus plus nothing is not true, I am hell-bound. So you can scream, and you can yell, and you may be right, but I have no hope in what you're saying, so I'm not going to embrace it. I'm not. You could be 100% right, and I quit. I'm done. I walk out of here. I'm not doing this anymore. Because if you're 100% right, I'm done. I'm just done. I quit. I quit. anchor is not behind the curtain, reigning at the right hand of the Father right now. Because if that is not true, I have no hope. Do you know the anchor? If you lived in 200 to 400 AD, a time when they were massacring Christians at high rate, Rome was. Do you know what the symbol of the Christian church was the first few hundred years? After, do you look this up? I did this week. It was the anchor. They would wear it on their neck. They would carve it everywhere it went. They would find it in caves as people were being hung. Jesus is my anchor. And he isn't at the bottom of the sea. He is in the heaven of heavens, anchored to the right hand of the Father. How do we know that God will keep his promises? Because the one who reigns is anchored to the Creator. He swore by an oath, and I don't think there's anything wrong with the Christian symbol of the church also becoming the cross. Because the cross is the confirmation that he kept his oath, that he kept his promise, that he kept his word. And then he rose, and then he ascended. You know why Jesus died? It's the language we use. It's the language Matthew uses. Jesus died because he's the only thing that can save us. The only thing. And you shall call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Where's God? Where was God last Sunday? Where is God this morning for you? Some of you are in hard situations. You have people in this room battling cancer. You have someone here who buried their daughter in the last week. Where's God? Hebrews is telling us that God is where he's always been. Crucified, risen, and reigning. That is a steadfast hope. And you know what? Sometimes for me, it literally feels like I am holding on to that for dear life. And I am. Because it is my life. He kept his end of the bargain. He was the bargain. And we are anchored in what he has done, not in what we have done. We are anchored in what he has accomplished, not in what we have accomplished. And that is why we have this certain hope, this steadfast, never failing, unbreakable anchor because it is what He has accomplished and what we have accomplished. I don't care who you are. If you tie your Christian walk or even your walk outside this place to what you can do and what you can have done, you will be like a double-minded man wavering all the time because you cannot anchor yourself in what you do. That is the gospel. The good news comes and says you don't have to. You're anchored in what He has done. Run. Flee to Jesus. He is the anchor of my soul and your soul. Oh no, I'll never let go. I'll never let go of you.